The tale begins with two teams clashing in battle. Smirking, the protagonist taunts the opposing team, remarking that attacking their city with only 1,000 troops is a severe underestimation of his country's strength. He turns to his teammates and asks if they share his sentiment. The opposing team glares at him with bloodthirsty eyes, ready to crush him. Undeterred, the protagonist, eyes shining with success, calls his teammates to join him in revealing the 8th Grand Corps. The MC narrates that Tactics Chronicle is a game utilizing the 4th generation of virtual reality, one of the many works crafted with the full sensory projection method. Although it's not typically a popular genre being a state management RPG, this game has captured attention due to its remarkable representation of a fantasy world brought to life. He recalls the first sight that greeted him was an expansive grassland stretching as far as the eye could see. He felt the wind, smelt the earth, and excitement surged through him. Clenching his fists, a certain exhilaration coursed through his veins. Overcome with anticipation, he began running. He shouted to run as the adventure began, and now it was time to build their dream nation. Standing on the balcony, he gazes out over the empire he built. His army hails him, a testament to his efforts. Now, after countless twists and turns, he has become Helion, the king of Archimaira. His city has grown into a superpower, and it is finally time to celebrate the 150th anniversary of its founding. All the NPCs are non-humans, with Helion as the sole human among them. He feels a swell of pride as he sees the fruits of his hard work in the game. However, Helion remains wary. He cannot decipher what the orcs were thinking, suspecting a potential raid event during the national celebration. They have gone through a lot to provoke a fight, but their efforts were thwarted before causing serious harm. This leaves him feeling a sense of incompleteness. Returning to his room, Helion waits for someone to arrive. The door opens, revealing a beautiful girl who respectfully informs him that preparations for the celebration are complete and asks him to come to the platform. Helion thanks her, giving her the keyword to move to the platform and asks her to follow him. These keywords are the system's way of allowing players to communicate with NPCs in the game. She obeys his command and starts moving. Revi is one of the 3 NPCs Helion obtained from the Gasha when he first started playing. Initially, she was a low-ranked species. The second was a low-ranked demon cat, and the third was a rare species of elf. Over time, these 3 NPCs have risen to become commanders of the nation's first 3 corps, alongside other NPCs Helion has acquired. Together, they command the 8 Grand Corps of Archimaira, with the strongest among them leading these elite units. Helion has personally trained and nurtured them with care, raising them into first-class commanders. Tears well up in his eyes, the only explanation being the sentimentality stirred by the festival and this significant milestone. He smirks, realizing he has yet to prepare a speech for this year. Though he knows it won't affect anything, he must still do it, as delivering the speech is an essential part of a role-playing game. As Helion sits peacefully, he feels the ground quake, his eyes widening in shock as the entire city trembles. Reeve rushes over and he asks her what's happening. As the tremors subside, confusion clouds his mind. Reeve asks if he's all right, to which he replies that he's fine and tells her not to worry about him. He then orders the NPCs to pause the event. Looking outside, he's stunned to see a forest where there was none before, wondering what happened to the familiar terrain. Surveying his kingdom, he notes that it still stands, leading him to dismiss the idea of a natural disaster. He suspects terrain-altering magic and considers that the 3rd and 4th Corps are stationed in the capital. Helion then orders Reeve to return to the office. Helion approaches the magic ball, commanding it to access the nearest base and its commander, but it doesn't work. Shocked, he orders it to open the map. As the map unfolds, confusion grips him. The base has disappeared, and the entire area outside the capital is now filled with gray marks, indicating unexplored territory. Further shock hits him when he realizes that it must be a forced transfer, suspecting they might have been sent to explore the entire map. He can hardly believe it, as forced transfers are among the rare but disastrous events in the game. He recalls hearing about an entire capital being transferred once, though he's uncertain about the details. However, knowing the game's notorious developers and their penchant for causing chaos, it seems entirely possible. Helion then notices Reeve, who appears terrified. This puzzles him since she's a brave character in the game. He considers the possibility of a fear anomaly, realizing this event could be highly difficult and troublesome. Helion approaches Reeve and informs her that it appears the capital has been forcibly transferred. He instructs her to assess the current state of the kingdom, stating he will send minimal instructions to each commander. He asks her to contact them and gather as much information as possible. Reeve agrees and moves to follow his command. Hillian then opens the screen, commanding it to prepare the orders. He instructs each of the corps to begin the event, ensuring everyone is mobilized and ready for the challenges ahead. Hillian assigns tasks to the divisions, the first to support him directly, the second to maintain order and protect citizens, and the third to treat the wounded and maintain the capital's barrier. The 4th Division is to investigate the nearby area, the 5th to repair damaged houses, and the 6th and 7th to gather information and repair facilities. He instructs the 8th Division to monitor the perimeter from the sky and supervise their subordinates, warning them to avoid provoking other countries. Understanding the situation and calming the people are their top priorities. After issuing these commands, he leans back, contemplating that now he must wait for their reports. He reflects on the audacity of scheduling such an event on the day of the nation's founding celebration, but acknowledges that game engineers are capable of such things. With a sigh, he vows to complain if the event turns out poorly. He considers that even if the event goes smoothly, many people would still complain, so he decides to check with the other kings. However, upon opening the system, he finds no one else is online except him. Confused by this, he is startled by a forceful knock on his door, and Reeve bursts in, urgently asking for permission to enter. She reports on the current situation, and Helene inquires if the conditions are dire. She replies with concern, explaining that such a situation has never occurred before, making it highly complicated. She informs him of the primary issue. The capital is completely surrounded by a forest. According to the 6th Division's report, this forest possesses an illusionary effect, complicating any attempts to gain further clarity from within the capital's barrier. Helene considers the illusionary effect and decides that he needs to reinvestigate the situation. He suggests using personnel from the 4th Division, but Reeve informs him that they have already conducted an investigation. Perplexed, Helene questions her decision and decides to form a temporary investigation team with the elves stationed at the code, taking into account terrain stability. Reeve acknowledges his decision and agrees to inform the 4th Division commander accordingly. She then proceeds with the next report from the 8th Division's aerial reconnaissance. They discovered that only the north direction has less dense forest after surveying the perimeter from the sky. This makes it challenging to gather further information from within the capital's barrier. Hillian's eyes widened in confusion. How could she be so precise when he hadn't even given her any commands? She continues, explaining that the dragons had complained about wanting to fly higher or scout directly, so she hit them to keep them quiet. The order was to avoid provoking other countries, but the dragons didn't seem to understand. She goes on about the kingdom's order being well maintained. However, just as she is about to mention the recently joined ogre faction, Hellian's face contorts with fear. He interrupts her, asking in confusion if he had used any specific keywords. Reeve, now puzzled herself, asks what he means by that. Hellian freaks out and exclaims that he has been talking to himself, yet she has been responding to him. She apologizes, asking if his words weren't meant to be orders. Hellian loses his mind, exclaiming that an NPC can't respond on its own without any keywords. Reeve, growing angry, asks if she has said something unnecessary and apologizes for interrupting his contemplation. Hellian, shocked, tells her to hold up because he needs to call the GM. However, when he tried to contact them, he received no response. No matter what he does, he tries to calm himself down, but his actions only confuse Leave. She asks if he is okay, noting that he doesn't look well. She moves so close to him that their faces are nearly touching. Hellian touches her face and freaks out even more. In the game, players can feel their 5 senses, like touch and warmth, thanks to the full sensory projection system. But those sensations are artificial. Now he can feel her breath. Shocked, he sees his arm stretch out and realizes he is actually touching her face. Moreover, her cheeks gradually turn red, and there is a sweet scent unique to women. All of this can be explained by 3 possibilities. The first theory is that the game has been upgraded, evolving the AIs and improving the sensory system to the point where it can't be distinguished from reality. The second theory is that it might be a prank, and Leave is actually a girl cosplaying as his character, an ultimate surprise from the developers. The third theory is a common theme in internet novels where the main protagonist gets thrown into a world similar to a manga or game, like the concept of isekai transfer. These possibilities make him freak out even more, sweat running down his face. His reaction makes Leave worry. She urges him to take a seat, saying she will call the 3rd Division commander right away. Hellian quickly asks her not to, insisting he is fine. Despite her concern, she suggests he get checked up, but he refuses, saying he is perfectly fine and she should focus on gathering information. She agrees reluctantly, reminding him to take care of himself. Helion then attempts an emergency logout, but access is denied and nothing happens. He remembers the excitement he felt that morning when the game was first released, the anticipation still fresh in his mind. But now, everything has taken a dramatic turn, and the game holds an entirely new and unsettling meaning for him. In the game Tactics Chronicle, a unique aspect of the fantasy genre is that kings have no combat power. Their physical abilities are equal to or lower than those of real-world humans. No one can increase their stats, and their attack power is set to 0. In other words, only the subordinates are strong while the kings are the weakest. Leve informs Helion that all the commanders are present and bowing to him. Helion orders them to stand and thanks them for gathering. He mentions that he hasn't seen some of them for a while but stresses that there is no time to celebrate their reunion, so he will get straight to the point. Although he speaks proudly, he thinks to himself that he must maintain the facade of a noble king. He then gestures towards Balin, the sword lion of the Archimaira kingdom, and asks him to explain the anomalies that have befallen their kingdom. Balin stands and explains that while there is no issue with the kingdom's security, many citizens were injured in the incident. However, they are now composed and recovering. Helion thanks him and then addresses Altina for her report. Altina, commander of the Holy Spirit Order, reports to Helion that all injured have been treated, but the main road beyond the city's barrier has vanished, replaced by a dense forest with an illusion effect. As he listens, he realizes that NPCs other than Lee also possess an ego. Altina, the commander of the Holy Spirit Order, a team of recovery and support specialists, stands out. Her character possesses traits of compassion, cooperation, and dignity, exuding kindness. In Helion's view, she embodies the nurturing presence of an ideal older sister, with her beauty enhancing this perception. Altina further explains that the forest appears to have an illusion effect, and unfortunately, she couldn't break through it. Helion, honing in on the problem, declares that their primary goal is to investigate the situation and gather information on the surrounding area as quickly as possible while keeping their country's presence hidden. He then orders them to exercise extreme caution to avoid provoking other countries unnecessarily. Each commander nods in agreement. Helion sighs in relief that no one objected to his cautious plan, yet a nagging doubt lingers, thinking if they see him as a coward. Pushing the thought aside, he turns to Leve and inquires if the 4th Division, composed of elite magicians, can dismantle the forest illusion. Leve, clearly frustrated, responds that she received a report from the 4th Division commander, indicating that it will take some time to decipher due to the unknown magic formula and the different system at play. Leve, commander of the 1st Division, exhibits brave traits. She leads the guard forces, a small light unit aiding the king across different fields, and serves as supreme commander overseeing all 8 divisions. Despite her composed demeanor, she suggested that if permitted, they could try brute force tactics, either by erasing the entire forest or overriding its terrains. Helion sternly shouts that brute force is not an option, as it would expose their existence if there is a threatening force in the surrounding area. He acknowledges that they might already be exposed, but insists there is no need to increase that risk. He won't take any rash actions. Leve, in her usual assertive manner, replies that she will relay the message to the commanders, instructing them to compose themselves. Following Helion's order, she will notify them that Helion Sama has officially banned brute force tactics. Helion carefully observes Leve, noting her composed exterior but discerning a different story from her tail's movements. He finds it useful for understanding her mood and commends her. He then elaborates on his practice of observing his subordinates' expressions. In this game, rebellion is a possible outcome if happiness remains critically low and loyalty drops below a certain threshold. Should rebellion occur, it would pit powerful monsters against a weak human ruler. He forces himself to stop dwelling on doubts and focus on the situation at hand. They need to proceed cautiously to avoid provoking foreign countries during their investigation. Addressing a beautiful girl, he asks if he can entrust the investigation to her, the commander of the 6th Division. She respectfully addresses him as Lord and assures him that her division will give their all as expected. However, she points out that if he is asking whether they can investigate the forest, that would pose a problem. Helion anxiously considers that Camelia's 6th Division, shaped during the Cold War with other nations, excels in gathering information. Camelia, sounding regretful, apologizes for what she sees as her inadequacy. She explains that the monsters under her command, a part of the 6th Division, have never explored uncharted areas. This lack of experience makes her doubt their ability to successfully complete the mission. He is taken aback, realizing that while the 6th Division excels in espionage, exploring uncharted territory is beyond their expertise. Their skills are honed for social interactions with enemy nations, not for venturing into unexplored areas. Camellia clarifies that she isn't refusing the task but expresses doubts about their suitability. She offers to take on the mission if no one else is available. Helion smirks, acknowledging her valid concerns and appreciating her honesty. He makes an effort to calm himself, reminding himself to maintain a lordly demeanor. Turning to Leve, Balin, and Eltina, he asks if they recall their previous investigation of an unexplored area long ago. Each of them affirms that they remember it well. Their confidence reassures Helion, prompting him to contemplate deploying a small elite troop with the highest likelihood of a safe return for the initial investigation. He decides to evaluate the situation further based on their findings. Helion issues his orders. Balin is to remain in the kingdom to maintain order, while Leve and Eltina are tasked with investigating the unexplored area. He praises both Leve and Eltina, believing that alleviating the tension of his subordinates is part of his duty as a king. He assures them not to worry, noting that the only difference from their first expedition is that Balin won't accompany them. Despite intending to instill courage in them, Helion becomes tense upon seeing the anxious expressions on their faces. He then orders the 6th Division to continue gathering and managing domestic information, and instructs Leve and Eltina to prepare themselves, setting their departure time from the North Gate in 15 minutes. Observing their expressions, he wonders if he has said something wrong, sensing they appear more nervous than before. Standing up, he announces that the others should resume their normal routines, deciding there is no use worrying about what has transpired. He needs to keep moving forward. As he walks away, Camellia sighs in relief, admiring how elegant her lord always remains. She expresses a desire to talk more with him if they aren't in their current predicament. Balin sharply tells her to refrain, which angers her. She retorts that she is only speaking her mind and criticizes him for being unfair, noting it has been 3 years since she had an audience with her lord. Balin responds with arrogance, suggesting that only commanders with strong personalities can stay in the capital, implying the first 3 are the only decent ones. Camellia smirks, urging him to stop exaggerating, hinting that Leve's and Eltina's hobbies and tastes are far from what he considers decent, implying his judgment is flawed due to his gender. Eltina laughs and asks Camellia what she is implying, inviting her to explain herself. She insists that there is nothing to explain. Eltina calmly approaches her and politely requests that she kneel. Shocked, Camellia hesitates, her voice trembling as she confirms if she hears correctly. Eltina smirks and repeats her request, her authoritative tone causing Camellia to kneel reluctantly. With composure, Eltina asks her politely to clarify what she means by suggesting that it is probably the same for her. Camellia trembles as she confesses her attraction to girls. Eltina calmly corrects her, explaining that her preference leans towards men like most women, but she enjoys cuddling with beautiful girls. Camellia is shocked by the response but insists she is abnormal for saying such things. Eltina reassures her, asserting that it's perfectly normal, and recalls a time when the king jokingly mentioned an adult game involving her. Changing the subject, Eltina reflects on the emotional depth of a girl's expression when she's on the verge of tears, considering it something very precious. Camilla panics and attempts to approach Balin for support, but he refrains from intervening in their conversation. Instead, he approaches Leve and asks if something is on her mind. She snaps back to reality and senses a lingering unease beyond the investigation of the kingdom's outskirts. Mentioning Helion Sama's name, she alerts everyone's attention. Eltina agrees that she senses something amiss, and Camilla confirms, asserting that it's not just her imagination. She asks Leve for permission to send a messenger. She grants it and then turns to Eltina, confessing that she has something to share and asking if Eltina is willing to listen. She pauses and prompts Leve to continue. Leve, feeling remorseful, bows her head and explains that during a recent forced transfer, she was worried about Helion Sama's safety and intervened unnecessarily. This displeased Helion Sama. However, she remains hopeful that regardless of the challenges he faces, he remains a great king and the rightful ruler of Archimaira. She concludes by stating that they must simply follow his orders. She adds that they will support him in every way possible. Eltina smiles warmly, expressing her belief that it is right for Leve to be concerned about their majesty. Leve apologizes, stating she simply wants to be truthful. Eltina reassures her, advising not to worry, as concern for their king is also part of her responsibilities. On the other hand, Helion is filled with worry. He reflects on his efforts to act like a king among his subordinates, but feels that his attempts to be approachable and just don't work out as planned. He acknowledges his mistakes and accepts that sometimes things don't go as expected. Resolving to focus on what he can control, he decides to carefully consider his next steps before taking action. He starts moving swiftly, making his way to the North Gate to personally observe and listen, recalling advice from a professor at a seminar who emphasized the importance of first-hand observation. Following his professor's advice on the importance of observation, Helion had never expected to become a king before the age of 20. Arriving at the North Gate, he is shocked to see a large army assembled, feeling bewildered by the extravagant display for the departure of just 2 commanders. Confusion mounts as Altina and Lieg approach, stating they have obtained permission and are now ready to attire him. Their actions puzzle him, unable to discern their intentions. Lieg proclaims her unwavering determination to protect him at all costs, with Altina echoing her commitment to safeguarding both him and the kingdom. Adding to his confusion, they present him with new clothes, prompting Helion to wonder why they are changing his attire. The realization strikes suddenly. They are dressing him as if he were leading the expedition himself. Recalling his earlier order for them to investigate, he understands that he is included this time. Valen's command for the army to prepare and raise their swords confirms it. Helion will personally lead the expedition team. Maintaining a forced smile, Helion remarks on revisiting unexplored areas, inwardly chastising himself for feigning nonchalance. He shouts for Lieg and Altina to depart, wrestling with the inexplicable feeling that he has erred. Isn't it odd for a king to lead an expedition himself? Thus he secretly hopes someone will intervene and stop him. As they ventured deeper into the forest, Helion couldn't shake off his worry. They had been walking for an hour, yet the scenery remained unchanged, dense with trees. Moving forward, he suspected an illusion affecting their perception, compounded by the confusing terrain. He wondered if he had lost his sense of direction. Suddenly, the sky cleared, allowing them to see clearly around them. Helion remarked that the forest seemed normal now, and Altina suggested that the illusion's effect had weakened. He speculated that they might have reached the boundary where the forest returned to its natural state. Just as they contemplated this, Lieg sensed a presence behind them and warned Helion. In an instant, a massive wolf appeared before them. Standing 5 meters tall, its hostile intentions are evident to Helion. He considered it their first encounter with such a formidable creature. Lieg readied herself to attack, but the wolf barked loudly and fled. Lieg explained that it had likely sensed they were not easy prey, responding to her killing intent. Helion reflects on her words, acknowledging Lieg's prowess as the pinnacle of lycanthropes, a managarm. He realized that it was only natural for his first subordinate, raised under the grates, to be much stronger than a mere stray wolf. Altina alerts Helion to move northeast of their position. Helion accessed his tactical interface and pulled up the map, noticing that data sharing seemed functional as Altina detected their presence. On the map, he spots white dots representing unknown entities. He relayed to the group that there were 2 figures, with one seemingly leading the way. Altina acknowledged they were moving together but couldn't determine their direction. Helion discerned a faint scream from the lead individual and urgently shouted for them to run, emphasizing the need to reach them quickly. They sprinted with the speed of the wind. Meanwhile, a girl, pursued by a menacing dog, raced desperately to save herself. Helion is puzzled by the hound and asks if it is his familiar. The elf notices him and questions whether he is a human, as he didn't expect to see a human here, especially this close to the abyss. Helion, puzzled by the abyss, brushes it off and questions what the elf meant by what he said earlier. He inquires about the tainted race. The elf asks if he is trying to play dumb and if he truly doesn't know about it. He clarifies that she's a half-elf, a mix of elf and human, unlike the pure-blooded elves who are adored by gods and spirits, adding that humans are a barbaric bunch with strength only in numbers, basically calling them a tainted race. The half-elf doesn't take kindly to this and insists that they aren't all bad, but the elf quickly shut her down, claiming her half-blood status meant she had no right to speak. Helion, feeling a bit annoyed, ponders that despite his noble appearance, the elf's disdainful expression is just as human-like. Something is amiss, though. In the game world, humans were a rare sight reserved for kings, not the average player like him. The fact that the elf saw him as a human just didn't add up. Helion tries to calm himself because it's not the time to ponder over it. He needs to gather information. He questions the elf about why he is chasing her. He replies that he is doing this just for fun, and even after destroying the city, some escaped. That's why he is using them as practice dolls for his hounds. Helion is stunned, and the elf elaborates that half-elves are a polluted race, and for them to create their city is nothing but arrogance. He further reveals that their objective is to utilize the city, but only after exterminating the half-elves. He questions Helion if he comprehends. He notes that he is quite arrogant despite being outnumbered and wonders if he is that confident in his abilities. Helion apologizes and reveals that he is a traveler, and it is his first time here, so he doesn't know the situation well. The elf smirks and asks if he is admitting to his ignorance. The elf tells him that although he may be a monkey, he is an exceptional one. However, it is too late to apologize, and he will receive punishment and die because he interfered in his hunt. The elf readies himself to attack, and the half-elf implores him to stop and leave them be, explaining that they were merely trying to live peacefully at the edge of the forest. They were driven to a place not far from the abyss and the forest, and yet they were still attacked while trying desperately to survive. The elf becomes furious and tells her to shut up, ordering his hounds to kill them and attacking them with a magic beam. Helion stands in front of her and questions what he is doing, wondering if he is trying to die. The wind is deafening, and he is being crushed by the noise. He deeply regrets his actions, but it's already too late for him. Suddenly, a barrier forms in front of them and absorbs the attack. Altina casted the barrier, and the elf commands his hounds to attack her. Helion watches and realizes that Lev and Altina were holding back, cautious because they face unknown forces. Attacking without understanding the situation is foolish. Gathering information is essential. That's why Altina hid her hostility and disgust behind a smile, and Lev suppressed her urge to strike. They restrained themselves until now, but everything changes when they are on the offensive. In an instant, Lev hurls a punch towards the man being covered in vines, prompting Helion to shout at her to stop. He intervenes by signaling that they seek no conflict but act in self-defense. The man demands an explanation, and Helion reiterates their stance, urging him to leave. The man insults Helion, calling him a bastard and boasting of his status as the hunter-chief of noble woods. Helion remains resolute, dismissing the man's threats and ordering him to flee. He pushes the man away, but the man rises with fury in his eyes and leaves. Fear grips Helion as he realizes the perilous situation of facing an adversary without understanding the full context. The elf girl approaches Helion gratefully, thanking him for saving her once again. He turns to her with relief, expressing his gladness that she is unharmed. But then he realizes that he has inadvertently revealed Lev's role in front of the elf girl, potentially compromising their cover as travelers. He quickly improvises, telling her that Lev and Altina are his bodyguards. He smiles wryly, admitting that he is just a mere handyman who can't fight. The elf girl first looks at him with confusion, then bursts into laughter, surprising everyone around. She apologizes for laughing, explaining that it is amusing to see him act so tough in front of the other elf, yet now seems troubled by someone like her. She tells him not to mind her and to speak to her as he did to the elf. Introducing herself as Lilifa, she thanks him again for saving her twice. Helion reassures her, saying it is nothing and they are simply defending themselves. She bows deeply, insisting that it doesn't change the fact he saved her and she wants to express her gratitude properly. She also apologizes for a question she asked after he saved her. Helion, puzzled, asks what she means. Lilifa responds that she wishes to know his name. Helion smiles, aware that Lev isn't pleased with how warmly he is speaking to Lilifa. He apologizes, explaining that he hadn't had the chance to introduce himself earlier, and says that his name is Helion. Lilifa smiles, shaking his outstretched hand. He then asks her about the elf they encountered earlier. Lilifa explains that he was an elf from the noble wood kingdom, which attacked their city. She further elaborates that her country is called Latestwood. It is a small city-state with just one city and a few settlements, built as a safe haven by half-elves around 30 years ago. Helion, surprised, remarks on how recent that is. Lilifa responds, explaining that the widespread recognition of half-elves only began around 30 years ago. She adds that while the number of half-elves started to increase rapidly about 100 years ago, it was quite rare to see one before then. She further tells him about the interspecies war with humans. Initially, the Eldish army had the upper hand due to their surprise attacks. However, they were soon overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of the human forces, leading to a series of humiliating defeats for the elves. Pushed back repeatedly, the elves were eventually forced to retreat to the Great Forest. In the end, they reached a pause, and after 5 years, a ceasefire agreement was formed. After the war, female elves were captured and used as sexual slaves. When the ceasefire agreement was established, the humans returned them, but many were pregnant and gave birth to half-elves. These half-elves became the ancestors of the current generation. However, even now, elves do not accept half-elves because of their hatred for humans, which often extends even more intensely towards half-elves. Helion, shocked, asks her about the human reaction. She explains that humans were generally the same, but they treated half-elves better than the elves do. While some humans attempt to kidnap them, not all are hostile, and some are kind. Helion is bewildered by this information, as there was no mention of such a history in the Tactical Chronicles. There was a group of elves, but the 100-Year War is not recorded. He then asks if elves are trying to harm half-elves, to which she responds affirmatively, adding that they only wish to live peacefully. Their capital is near humans, providing some protection as elves would use them in times of war, and the proximity to the abyss further deters action against them. However, the Noble Woods elves attacked them without reason 3 weeks ago. Helion asks Lilifa if she understands the reasons behind the uprising. She replies that she doesn't, noting that the rebels claim they want to reinstate noble governance in the city, but she doubts their sincerity. Helion then suggests that the insurgents might be aiming to expand their territories in anticipation of a conflict with humans. However, he questions whether the elves stand a chance against the humans. Lilifa admits it's possible, but thinks it's very unlikely. She argues that the military strengths of both sides are likely similar to those from 100 years ago. The rebels have caused too much damage to the city for it to be a useful strategic base. Furthermore, if their goal had been simply to claim territory, they wouldn't have pursued the fleeing residents. Helion continues, proposing that the unprovoked attack on their territory, without a formal declaration of war, suggests that the true target might have been the king or someone of equivalent authority. She explains that their society follows a matrilineal system, meaning they have a queen instead of a king. Recently, both the Queen of Latestwood and the Prince Consort have disappeared. Despite not being skilled in elven magic, the queen held considerable sway, having united her people and established their nation. Lilifa holds on to hope that the pivotal figure in their nation's founding, the queen, is alive and perhaps held captive by the elves. Helion is taken aback by her words, realizing not only has their capital fallen but their leader has also vanished, leaving them at a severe disadvantage in the war. He contemplates a strategy where those who have managed to escape could form alliances with other factions to launch a counterattack. However, he understands the plight of the half-elves, who face discrimination from both elves and humans, leaving them with no reliable allies. Lilifa interjects, asking him to pause momentarily. Helion agrees, allowing her to continue. She informs him that they will reach their settlement in approximately 10 minutes. She suggests that she should proceed ahead alone to notify their community beforehand, preventing any potential panic upon their arrival. Helion agrees with her plan, acknowledging its potential benefits. As he proceeds forward, Altina intercepts him, cautioning him about a magic circle ahead and urging him to remain vigilant. Meanwhile, Lilifa advances and begins chanting, signaling her arrival to her companions. He watches with bewilderment, pondering whether it is a summoning spell, unfamiliar to him despite his knowledge. He recalls a similar encounter with the elf earlier, realizing his understanding of magic is expanding with each new experience. Lilifa continues her chant, summoning an elf who appears and inquires about her well-being before noticing Helion. Lilifa demands the elf lower her bow, identifying Helion and his companions as travelers who have saved her. The elf hesitates, citing humans and elves as enemies, but Lilifa insists as her superior, commanding the elf to stand down. Helion observes the scene with surprise, wondering why an elder elf is obeying the younger one and addressing Lilifa with such respect. She apologizes for her companion's behavior, explaining that they are on edge due to the ongoing conflict. Helion accepts the apology but expresses his curiosity about her full name. She introduces herself as Lilifa Rim Latestwood, emphasizing that a short walk further will bring them to her homeland. As both an individual and a member of the royal family, she warmly welcomes them. As they continue walking, Helion can't help but notice the curious and wary glances directed towards him. Approaching an elf standing by a tree, he overhears a conversation about the newcomers being allowed into their settlement. It's a surprise that even an elf is among them. The elder elf explains that Lilifa-sama has deemed these individuals their saviors, though the reasons are unclear. Entering the city, Lilifa proclaims them her saviors and commands respect for them. The citizens murmur amongst themselves, intrigued by Helian's appearance, prompting him to ponder as if he's a rare creature in a zoo. Helian glances at Lilifa, realizing she is the queen's eldest daughter and now using the citizens' support acts as interim queen. Lilifa also has a sister, and with the missing pair, they are the ones related to the royal family. It is unusual for Lilifa to be alone in the forest. Sitting in the hall, Helian asks her if she ventured out to protect the queen. Lilifa confirms this, explaining that elves from the noble wood have been capturing their people instead of killing them. With this intelligence, she believes her parents are still alive. To safeguard them, she led an elite team. Helian is puzzled and asks why she was alone if she had a team. Sadly, she reveals their rescue attempt failed. The enemy intercepted them before they breached the city's outer defenses. Her team was captured, forcing her to flee alone. As Helian tries to ask more questions, the elf behind Lilifa grows angry and shouts that he is asking too much and lacks courtesy towards Lilifa-sama. Lilifa shouts at Wenli to stop, but Wenli continues, saying it doesn't make sense that Helian claims to be a traveler yet knows so little about their situation, questioning if he is truly a traveler. Lilifa becomes angry and moves as if to confront Wenli, but Helian intervenes. He acknowledges Wenli's concerns, understanding she might suspect them of being agents of the noble wood. She clarifies that she accused them of this. Helian insists they are travelers, though he admits his explanation of their purpose might be vague. As Helian attempts to clarify the situation, Wenli becomes confused and asks what he means. He explains that he originates from the abyss, stunning everyone present. Wenli reacts with alarm, questioning if he is a subordinate of a demon lord. Helian chuckles, remarking that it is amusing to hear that demon lords are associated with the abyss. Observing Lilifa and the other elves' reactions, he deduces that the abyss they speak of refers to the perilous forest, hinting at its danger through their responses. He recounts how they were unexpectedly transported to this unfamiliar forest while exploring an ancient castle. They wander through it for 5 days, which explains their unfamiliarity with the current situation. He emphasizes that they are unprepared for their sudden arrival here, seeking understanding from the elves. Wenli remains bewildered, asking how he survived 5 days in the forest without any provisions. Without a word, Helian gestures to Liv and Eltina, who produce pouches containing necessary supplies, silently offering them as proof of their survival skills in this unfamiliar universe. Eltina and Lee toss the pouches towards Wenli, who watches in shock as various items spill out. She asks them what these things are. Helian steps in and explains that they found these pouches while exploring some ruins. He admits he doesn't fully understand how they work, but these items can store objects that exceed their physical size, a phenomenon he finds remarkable. Lilifa expresses surprise, calling it unbelievable. Wenli deduces that these pouches were crucial for their survival during their 5-day ordeal in the forest. In reality, Helian knows these magic items as item pouches, advanced storage items common in VRPGs, but rare in their high-quality form, capable of storing more than ordinary items. He sees them as valuable items that serve to distract from questions about their identity as travelers. Helian planned this strategic move intentionally, realizing that claiming to be a traveler would raise suspicions. By entering the forest without luggage and later revealing the item pouches, he aimed to impress and divert attention from other suspicious aspects of their story. This calculated strategy ensures their credibility remains intact despite the shocking revelations. As Helian considers how to dispel their suspicions, a girl suddenly enters the room. Lilifa introduces her as Lilifa, her younger sister, and asks her to leave since they are in the middle of an important discussion with Helian. However, Lilifa looks at Helian and asks if he was the one who saved her sister. Helian responds that it was his companions, Liv and Eltina, who did the fighting as he is not strong enough to fight. Lilifa apologizes for her sister's rudeness, but Helian tells her there's no need and addresses Lilifa directly. Lilifa then asks Helian an unexpected question, which angers Lilifa further. She shouts at her sister to stop spouting nonsense and to come to her, but Lilifa hides behind Helian, claiming that since he is human, she can ask him odd questions. She then hugs him from behind and makes an awkward comment about her appearance compared to her sister's. Lilifa's anger flares up, making everyone aware of her frustration. When they step outside, Lilifa apologizes again for her sister's behavior. Helian reassures her, saying it's okay and not to worry about it. Lilifa, still holding his hand, continues her antics, providing a welcome distraction from further questioning, but the situation remains awkward. Helian realizes he should find a topic to discuss to ease the tension, so he asks the little girl's age, to which Lilifa asks him to guess. He guesses she might be 13, but Lilifa disagrees, saying that she is 10. She further says something about her family traits, but Lilifa shouts at her to stop spouting nonsense. Lilifa then tells her that Wenli is walking towards them. Lilifa shouts back, saying that she will never believe such a thing, but Lilifa insists she look, as Wenli is really approaching. As Wenli arrives, Lilifa asks Hylian to wait for her for a bit. She then asks Lilifa to guide him to the settlement and not to tease him. As she walks away, Hylian feels disappointed as he wants to ask her many questions, but then he guesses that he should ask her sister instead. As he is drinking water, Lilifa asks him a surprising question about his future plans and asks if he will marry her. Her question startles Hylian so much that he chokes on water and begins coughing, causing concern for Lilifa. She asks if he is okay, and he replies that he is fine. He asks her what she said, and she repeats that she wants him to marry her. Her words leave Hylian stunned. The idea of proposing to a human she just met felt bizarre to him, and he couldn't believe she found him handsome. Such things never happened to him, making him think this was too unrealistic, like something out of a dating sim. He considers the entire situation too fantastical and concludes that it must be a dream. He tells her to be happy, as it's just a dream, but she informs him that it's not a dream but reality. He frets, pleading for her to calm down. But she coolly assures him that she's fine, and it's actually him who needs to dial it down. He counters, urging her to calm down because she doesn't even know his name, questioning why she's suddenly proposing marriage and what sort of joke she's playing. She insists that she is not joking and asks him for his name. He replies that he is Hylian, and she proposes to him again, mentioning that she looks like her mother and will have a good figure. Hylian tells her that having a good figure is not a reason for him to marry someone, which confuses her, leading her to ask if he doesn't like good figures. Lilifa's questions make him so uncomfortable that he can't even look at his companions. She then mentions that if he prefers a different figure, there might be a problem since her sister has them due to her thicker elf blood. Hylian, exasperated, shouts that this is not the issue. He explains that to marry, she would need her parents' permission and suggests they discuss it after they return. Using this method of rejection, a polite evasion, is the only way he can handle the situation any longer. Lilifa moves ahead, revealing that meeting her parents might be impossible as they are likely dead. While her sister believes their parents are alive, Lilifa knows the truth. Elves despise half-elves and might have killed her mother first due to her figure. Her words make Hylian realize how wrong he had been. The girl before him isn't an innocent child, but a legitimate member of the royal family of a country called Latestwood. He surmises that Lilifa overheard their conversation and intervened to save the traveler who had rescued her sister. She is using everything at her disposal, her status as a princess and her circumstances, to win his favor. Hylian feels deep sadness, recognizing his mistake in treating her like a child. Yet despite his sympathy, he knows he can't help her due to his own pressing problems. He then speaks up, explaining that he can't marry her because he has many issues to resolve. However, he adds that he wants to help them if he can. Lilifa becomes excited and asks if he is telling the truth. He confirms, saying that while there isn't much he can do, but will try his best. He throws out the idea of a pinky promise, but she doesn't quite get it. So he demonstrates, and Lilifa confidently declares they'd made a promise. We see Lee cooking food for the elves. The citizens gape at her, wondering who she is and whispering about how she must be one of the travelers Lilifa-sama mentioned. Lee tosses in the ingredients and ignites the flame. The dish starts sizzling, and Lilifa refers to her as Dog Oni-san and inquires about the meal's readiness. Lee clarifies that she is definitely not a dog and mentions that the food is almost done, then asks if she wants to taste. She offers her a sample, and Lilifa's expression brightens with happiness. Lee is pleased that she enjoyed it and serves the food in a bowl for her. Lilifa asks if she can have it, and Lee tells her that it is by Hylian's orders. She thanks Lee, and as a boy expresses hunger. Lilifa encourages them to have a meal, and Lee distributes the food while the races intentionally enter a taste. Hylian observes the situation and realizes that the people are not eating properly due to a food shortage. They have taken in all the people who escaped from the capital, and the settlement cannot accommodate so many. If this situation continues for weeks, they would certainly face a food shortage. Lilifa approaches him and thanks him for the meal. He assures her that it is fine and expresses his desire to help them. He then asks if the story of the demon lord in the abyss is true. She explains that, according to the elves, it is a territory where the demon lord once resided, and she recounts many other legends, such as the Forbidden Ethereal Realm, indicating that the Abyss has long been considered a forbidden land. She reveals that even if the legends did not exist, no elf or half-elf would intentionally approach the forest. Helion inquires about the reason, and she explains that a demonic beast occasionally emerges from the Abyss. It is extremely powerful and easily eliminates the demonic beasts in the forest. There have been attempts by subjugation teams to deal with these beasts, but few have succeeded. Helion asks what happens to the demon beasts that are not killed, and she clarifies that they usually go on a rampage and then return to the Abyss. She explains that the demon beasts are a natural disaster for the forest's inhabitants, who can only pray and wait for the beasts to return to the Abyss. Helion wonders why they chose to construct a city in such a risky spot, but quickly realizes it would be daft. After all, the poor half-elves are under persecution and have no other option but to settle in a dangerous area. He questions if there are other races that intentionally enter the Abyss. Lilifa reveals that some humans, known as adventurers, do. They delve into the depths to acquire rare materials, citing the allure of magic and valuable components from the powerful beast that lurks within. Helion wonders if Latestwood sees many adventurers, with Lilifa confirming their presence and the lucrative currency they bring in. Helion cheekily notes the importance of trade for growth, suggesting that rulers must think alike. He notices a distinct lack of adventurers in the vicinity. Lilifa reveals that they've all rushed off to a human border city that was under attack by a horde of demon beasts a month ago. They're struggling because the horde was no joke. Helion inquires about the border city, learning it's like the shield of humanity, separating human and demon territories. He had a hunch something like this was brewing, but it's all news to him. Despite demons being a thing in the game, he had never heard of a specific demon territory. Eager to learn more, his brain starts to hurt from the information overload. As everyone is enjoying the food, Helion is pleased that everything is proceeding smoothly. He spots some kids and inquires with Lilifa if they are little werecats, pointing out their small stature. She confirms they're werecats, but clarifies they're tiny because they come from halflings. He's taken aback by the mix of species around and never thought he'd encounter a dwarf. He always thought dwarves weren't fans of elves and wonders if that dislike doesn't extend to half-breeds. She explains that half-elves founded the country, but many other half-species also contributed by gathering resources to establish their country. She further elucidates that they are powerless and have no one to rely on, which is why they support each other. They managed to build the country through mutual cooperation. Helion smiles and remarks that it is an extraordinary country. Lilifa responds that it is her pride and joy. He continues his conversation with Lilifa until Liv finishes distributing the food. Concerned that Lilifa might request him to lend her a litna and leave, but she never broaches the topic. Their discussion ranges over their favorite foods, hobbies, and childhood stories, forming a simple yet engaging talk. Despite the challenging times, she maintains her smile, demonstrating her aptitude as a ruler. Helion reflects that, if placed in the same situation, he is not confident he could act similarly. He observes them as Liv offers to clean up, but Lilifa insists that she cannot allow a guest to do it and mentions that the children want to play with her. Helion opens the chat window, apprehensive that communication might fail beyond the Abyss, but encounters no issues. Others cannot see his window, so it appears to them that he is gazing at the sky. He sends a message inquiring about the situation on their side and informs them that he has established contact with the locals. Liv takes care of the dishes while Litna smiles, watching them. Suddenly, a glass slips from Helion's hand, and the noise stuns everyone. His smile vanishes, and Lilifa asks what is wrong. He is shocked to see the message window reporting that a rebellion has started. The scene shifts to the castle, where enemies are engaged in battle with the army. A division commander appears, expressing hope to be entertained before the supreme commander arrives. In a rush to depart, Helion informs everyone of an urgent message from a friend delivered via a magical device, compelling him to leave post-haste. He humbly asks for forgiveness and vows to make it up to them later. With a sense of urgency, they sprint back while Helion sends a message to secure the throne room in his absence. Liv apologizes for carrying him, citing the emergency nature of the situation. Helion reassures her with a nonchalant remark about skipping pleasantries and focusing on reaching their destination quickly. Helion knows he cannot allow the throne to be taken away. Although the seizure will not cause immediate destruction, it will decrease the people's happiness and morale, rendering many of his kingly abilities like the function window. Losing the throne would be a fatal blow, and the rebellion occurring in the capital could lead to the kingdom's destruction if the throne is captured and other requirements are met, signaling a successful revolution. This would mean game over, as the kingdom would enter a destroyed state and the data of the player who rules it would be completely erased. Hylian is frustrated, fearing the kingdom's destruction and pondering if this will lead to his own demise. He questions if he is dreaming and wishes someone would confirm it. The scene shifts to the divisions and the rebels fighting, with the 5th Division Commander Gardy growing bored of killing the weak. They try to stop him, but he tells them they have no chance of winning and need to bring someone as powerful as Leve if they want to stop him. As they reach the capital, Hylian asks Alatina if she can hear the sounds of battle. She informs him that the castle is safe and the fight is in the bazaar, not having reached the castle yet. He orders Leve to head to the castle. They enter, and he directs them to go straight to the throne room. The soldiers see him and clear the path. Hylian asks about the situation and yells if anyone has touched the throne. Balin informs him that no one has touched it. When the fight started, they immediately began defending the throne and formed a special unit for its safety. He reaches the throne and inquires about the other commanders, questioning who the traitor is. He trusts Balin because, if he were a traitor, the throne would have already been taken. He also trusts Leve and Alitna. However, he is concerned about the other commanders. Some of them seem to be a bit too self-centered and pleasure-seeking for his liking. There's one who's a bit of a chaos maker, while Alitna is all about harmony and positivity. The Chaos Commander is on a power trip, ignoring anyone beneath them. One of them is just plain evil. Balin informs Hylian that the 5th Division Commander is leading the troops against the rebels and has also taken control of part of the 6th Division, with the other commanders following his orders. This news shocks Hylian, prompting him to ask who instigated the rebellion. Balin reveals that it is the work of the Ogre faction, the same group that attacked before the festival and then surrendered. During the battle, Camilla confronts Gardy, questioning why he is using her forces and causing unnecessary damage. He tells her to be quiet, arguing that it's better this way, ensuring they will never oppose them again. Hylian lets out a breath of relief, prompting Balin to ask if he's okay. He brushes it off, attributing his exhaustion to being a worrywart and squeezing Leve too tightly. Balin notices her oddly joyful demeanor and asks about her being happy. Hylian quickly shuts that down, questioning why he would think she's thrilled in this situation. She asks him what makes him think she is happy. Hylian tells them that the rebels have been taken care of and suggests that they go check the city. Hylian gazes at the fallen rebels, unable to believe the Ogre faction was behind the uprising. He had been trying to reduce their rebellious tendencies by holding a festival, but it was suspended, and his absence as king exacerbated the situation. Given the Ogre's lack of intellect, it was almost inevitable they would start a rebellion. He is repulsed by the sight of the bodies, finding the scene disturbingly realistic. Unlike in the game, there is no ethical code to regulate such brutality. Gardy notices the king and informs him that he has dealt with the rebels. Hylian commends him for his work. Gardy humbly downplays his efforts, admitting it was his fault for not preventing the rebellion and expressing his willingness to accept any punishment. Hylian reassures him that no punishment is necessary, praising him for protecting the city. He inquires about the rebel leader, and Gardy points to the ogre's mutilated body. Hylian examines it, finding the sight difficult but acknowledging that this outcome was what he intended. Leve addresses Gardy, criticizing his informal manner of speaking to Hylian. Gardy explains that the king has permitted his casual tone and questions why she is raising the issue again. She insists there are limits, and that he must show more respect, especially in front of the soldiers. Unwilling to argue, Gardy tells Hylian he will attend to other matters. Leve asserts she has not finished talking, and Alitna urges them to stop fighting. In a cold tone, Hylian orders them to stop their bickering. Suddenly, the ogre stirs. Sensing danger, Leve moves to protect Hylian. In Tactics Chronicle, the king is the weakest character, making it impossible for him to dodge a close-range attack. His death seems certain as the enemy launches a surprise attack. Hylian, panicked, questions why this is happening, cries out that he doesn't want to die, and pleads for help as everything fades to black. The commanders find him lying lifeless, and tears stream from Leve's eyes. The weakest person, King Hylian, has been betrayed by his own people and has met his end. Hylian admits to having a dream, one that felt vaguely familiar. In it he spots the enemy on the horizon, a crew of elves, dwarves, demons, Kijin, fairies, demonic beasts, slimes, ghosts, and dragons. This multi-species army is all too familiar. His own forces are scarce. He has only 3 pieces left, 2 of which have already been destroyed. The only remaining piece is a beautifully crafted wolf piece, but it offers no hope of victory. In the dream world of Tactics Chronicle, Hylian pursued romance. He trained his friends, pursued his ideals, humbled the strong, saved the weak, and brought peace to the world. He sent messages of peace to his neighbors, culminating in the end of his dream. It was checkmate, leaving him with no escape. Despite the strength of his last wolf piece, it was no match for thousands of enemies. Hylian had been prepared for this. He had destroyed other countries, created 150 years of history, and accepted that his turn would come someday. When it did, he was ready to give his life and accept the ending. Yet as the actual end approached, he couldn't help but scream that he didn't want to die. This wasn't what he had expected. His miniature reality wasn't supposed to conclude this way. It was meant to be a fun fantasy game. He raised his head and saw a blood-stained weapon poised to crush his skull. Hylian screams and wakes up. Looking around, he wonders if he is in his bedroom. Liv gazes at him, tears streaming down her face, relieved that he has finally awoken. Hylian looks at her and ponders that it was a dream. Suddenly, he is shocked and wonders what is happening. He remembers heading to the battlefield where the rebels were fighting and then being attacked. He recalls everything and questions how he is still alive, certain that he had died. He starts asking about the ogre, causing Liv to worry. She tells him to calm down and not to burden himself. She informs him that he has been sleeping for more than half a day. Hylian is shocked and insists it is impossible. He doesn't remember sleeping, which means it wasn't a dream if his memory serves him correctly. He questions Liv if he was killed by the Red Ogre, and she confirms that he had died. Hylian, confused, realizes the auto-revive mechanism is still functioning. In Tactics Chronicle, the king's death doesn't signify game over, as the king can respawn with certain limits and penalties. He has been killed once and has respawned. He asks Liv if the throne is safe and what happened to the Red Ogre. She assures him that the throne is safe. The elite squad from the 2nd Division is guarding the throne room, and she informs him that all the rebels have been dealt with. Liv explains that their leader had a unique skill. Hylian checks the status of the skill called Last Stand, which activates upon dying and delivers a critical hit to any enemy within range. The subjugation was successful, and the 5th Division leader, Gardy, killed the rebel leader. Because of this, Altina and Liv had let their guard down, leading to Hylian's reckless approach to the ogre with a unique skill. Liv kneels and apologizes, admitting she failed to protect him and is ready to accept any punishment. Hylian looks at her, then glances at her hair. He orders her to come closer, and she stands and approaches him with her eyes closed, scared. He asks her to sit on the bed beside him, and she does so. Hylian reaches out, and she closes her eyes in fear. He pats her gently, and she is shocked. As he gets closer, her heart starts to beat faster. He touches her hair and her cheeks, which turn red. He notices her faint scent and soft hair, her heartbeat, and he wipes her tears and tastes them. Liv blushes and looks at him in confusion. Hylian muses that there is no sign of an approaching army, no sign of monsters surrounding the throne, and all the commanders are alive and safe. Everything he saw was a dream, but the reality he is in now is not a dream. Hylian asks Liv if there are any other issues besides the Ogre Rebellion. She stammers, struggling to respond. Hylian reassures her, telling her to calm down and that she doesn't need to force herself to talk. Composing herself, she apologizes and informs him that there are a few minor issues, but none that threaten the kingdom. He then inquires about the other commanders. Liv reports that Altina and Gardy are managing their divisions and are awaiting news of his condition. Hylian instructs her to tell Gardy to continue maintaining public order and, in the event of another rebellion, to use his own judgment unless he issues specific orders. When Liv asks if he is certain about this, he confirms he is. He acknowledges that he died due to a rebellion in Gardy's jurisdiction and stresses that no one could have predicted the Ogre Rebellion, so they cannot afford to lose more manpower. He also instructs her to have Altina repair damaged buildings and treat the wounded. Hylian emphasizes the need for better coordination between divisions, ensuring they adapt to situations without disobeying his orders. He tells Liv to order Balin to return throne room security to normal since the rebels have been dealt with. Mentioning that he is getting hungry, Liv assures him she will have someone bring food. He ponders over the concept of role-playing, highlighting the importance of acting according to the setting he has created. Now that he is a king, he cannot speak carelessly. He reveals his real name, Misaki Chikasa, and admits his fondness for role-playing. He is glad he learned proper table manners because he wanted to role-play as a proper king. He then dismisses the maids, saying leave is all he needs. As he drinks the tea, he remarks that it is delicious, noting that it tastes better than in the game. This reinforces his belief that this is real life. Over the past 24 hours, many unexpected things have happened. Despite his mind telling him it's impossible, he is starting to accept this reality. If this is indeed the case, he needs to devise a policy for moving forward. His goal is to return to his original world. He spent his youth playing Tactics Chronicle, enjoying it purely for entertainment. That's why he wants to return. To do so, he needs to understand why he is in this situation. But there is very little information to form a hypothesis. He wonders about the differences between this world and the game. He can still use many features available in the game, such as the tactical menu for combat support and information, the function menu for data sharing, chat for communicating with others, and the home menu for log reports and camera. The fact that others cannot see his window was also a game feature, and there is no issue with data sharing. He reflects on the revival of friendly units, noting the specific conditions. Only residents of the player's kingdom can be resurrected. The player must know the monster's full name. Only monsters that died within the last 24 hours can be resurrected, and each subordinate can be revived twice. While eating, Hylian contemplates his situation. His kingdom is surrounded by a dangerous forest called the Abyss, and is in the middle of a war between Latestwood and Noblewood. He has identified two forces surrounding the kingdom and wonders how strong these factions are compared to his country, Archimaira. Hylian cannot ignore internal matters, as a rebellion has already occurred. He needs to focus on internal stability in addition to exploring the outside world. He worries about the consequences of another rebellion, knowing that everyone can only be revived a few times, which also applies to him. He has a maximum of 6 lives. Having died once, he is down to 5. If he dies 5 more times, it will be game over, and all character data will be erased completely. Hylian finishes his meal and looks out at the city from his palace. He needs to be certain of one thing and tells Liv he will ask her a question. She might wonder why he asks this, but he tells her to answer as she pleases. He then asks her what she thinks about weak beings. Hylian probes Liv on her thoughts about those less mighty than her, using the rescued Lilifa as an example. She seems a bit baffled at first, but then clarifies that she saw Lilifa as strong. He is quick to mention that he saw Lilifa as the weaker one compared to Liv. She concedes, confidently stating that she would triumph in any showdown with Lilifa, a fact even Lilifa recognized. Yet Lilifa didn't grovel or show any sign of inferiority. She treated them as equals. Upon reaching the village, Lilifa, though exhausted, continued to aid the locals selflessly. Liv elaborates that, despite being forced into an unwanted war and being overwhelmingly inferior in strength, the villagers haven't fallen into despair, largely due to Lilifa's role in maintaining their morale. Lilifa's strength of character and her ability to stand tall without fear, despite her weak body, make a strong impression on Liv. She believes that Lilifa embodies true strength through her unwavering spirit. In the game, monsters always prey on the weak, following the law of the wild. Hylian asks Liv if, despite being stronger than Lilifa, she doesn't follow this law and see Lilifa as inferior. Liv confirms that she doesn't see Lilifa as inferior. When Hylian asks why, Liv explains that it's because Lilifa is a citizen of Archimaira. Liv recalls her own early days of weakness when Hylian didn't abandon her, but helped her become strong. For her to treat weak beings as food would be disrespectful to his kindness. She chooses to follow the law of Archimaira that Hylian has set, rather than the law of the jungle. Hylian reflects on the nature of rebellions, understanding that they can occur at any time. Although the recent rebellion was easily suppressed, he knows that if the residents think their king is unfit to rule, another rebellion will take place. If several commanders were to rebel, the kingdom would fall. He recognizes that constant doubt would make him appear suspicious and could ultimately destroy the kingdom. He tells Liv that he understands and makes a decision. He resolves to become a great king and never doubt her. He vows to trust her no matter what happens, and if she betrays him, it would mean he was incapable of ruling over monsters. He instructs Liv to arrange a meeting with the commanders in 5 hours, excluding those who are preoccupied, and to inform them to gather in the audience hall. She accepts her orders, assures him she will do her best, and leaves to carry out his instructions. Hylian checks the status of his people and finds their happiness has decreased since he last checked. He deduces that the stress of teleportation is affecting them and realizes he cannot ignore it. The best way to increase their happiness is by removing the stressor, but he can't return to his original world or regain lost territories. He considers giving a public speech to relieve their stress. In the game, he only needed to say specific keywords and a few lines for a successful speech, but he has already confirmed that the keywords have no effect in this world. He wonders if he can relieve their anxiety through a speech without relying on the game's system. 5 hours later, all the commanders gather in the audience hall. The commanders of each division come into view with their attributes displayed before the king. Leve, Balin, Altina, Sellers, Gardy, Camilla, Robin, and Nogard, commanders of the 1st through 8th divisions respectively, kneel before Hellion. He instructs them to rise and commends their efforts. He explains that he summoned them to assess the current situation and discuss future plans. Rising from the throne, he acknowledges that they are on an unknown continent and mentions that Leve has informed them about the elves and half-elves inhabiting the land. He shares that they have gathered some information about their history, which was entirely unfamiliar to him. He explained that he double-checked the window but found no standard information. His map didn't show any recognizable land, confirming that this continent is entirely different from his own. The commanders look puzzled, so he asks if they have any questions. Leve inquires about the window and clarifies that it is like a phantom board visible only to him, and the map is one of its features. He has been using it to gather extensive geospatial information. The commanders are astonished, and Hellion wonders if they know the king's ability. He believes it would be advantageous for them to know about his special powers, as it would reduce the likelihood of rebellion. Hellion tells them they have obtained information from Latestwood, but it's not enough. They don't know whether there are only 2 nations near them or if there are other countries that can rival them. They don't know about any of it. Hellion tells them it's an emergency situation and they need more information to set a long-term policy on where they stand. Hellion asks Balin directly about the state of public order. Balin reports that the citizens were initially panicked during the rebellion, but they calmed down once they learned it had been resolved. He expresses concern about the ongoing stress among the populace. While their army has effectively managed threats, the unique circumstances they face are causing heightened anxiety. He suggests that unless a clear solution is announced, this stress will grow. Hellion acknowledges that monsters naturally follow power, and even as citizens, their nature hasn't changed. However, the current situation cannot be resolved through sheer power, which understandably causes stress. Balin highlights another issue. The influx of people to the capital for the festival has left many without housing. The inns are full, and the army camp is over capacity. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Hellion addresses Gardy, commending him for suppressing the rebels, but he responds that he must be punished for allowing Hellion's death. The punishment: Gardy and his division must work under the 7th Division's commander to build houses and temporary accommodations for the displaced. For security orders, Gardy will report to Balin. He looks to Balin, and Hellion reiterates that he must follow Balin's orders as part of his punishment. Gardy appears stunned, prompting Hellion to wonder if the punishment was too severe. Although he knows Gardy couldn't have prevented his death and acknowledges it was an accident, he needs to assert his authority as king. Confused by Gardy's hesitation, Hellion asks for an explanation. Gardy, not disheartened but rather taken aback, asks if the punishment is appropriate. Hellion, shocked by Gardy's reaction, reassures him, and Gardy apologizes, accepting his punishment. Hellion then instructs Leve and Altina to complete their current missions, promising to address their punishments later. He informs them that he will visit Latestwood again and that they will resume to be his bodyguards. Leve tries to speak, but Hellion interrupts her, stating that Latestwood is their primary source of information. He suggests that if they wish to gather more information, it would be best for those who previously visited to undertake the task, asking if he is mistaken. He then instructs Camilla that she will also accompany him. Camilla, excited, asks for more details. He explains that her duty will not be to guard him. Instead, she needs to gather intelligence from the residents there, utilizing her specialty. He tells her he is counting on her as she is the most reliable in this field. If he were to bestow a nickname upon her, it would be Archimaira's Ears, and he has high hopes for her. She looks at him with a resolute expression and assures him she will strive to meet his expectations. Hellion notices the other commanders' expressions, sensing they wish to say something. Camilla, on the other hand, exudes an air of arrogance. After a quick moment of reflection, he decides to step up and take charge. He praises Leve for her hard work as his right-hand woman and crowns her the grand title of Archimaira's Eyes, trusting her to keep a watchful eye on his every move. Then he turns to Balin and dubs him Archimaira's Claws, acknowledging his skill with weapons and reminding him to stay sharp for whatever curveballs the Ftcher might throw their way. Altina is given the nickname of Archimaira's Mane for her pivotal role in domestic affairs and spreading their influence. Celes is metaphorically referred to as Archimaira's tongue, owing to her ability to wield magic and perform various arts. Guardi receives the title of Archimaira's Arms due to his exceptional physical strength. Robin is named Archimaira's Feet for his contributions to supporting the kingdom with his technological tools. Nogard is given the name of Archimaira's Wings, commanding the famous dragons and dominating the battlefield from the sky. Understanding his directives, Hylian commands them to begin taking action, acknowledging the kingdom's precarious situation and expecting much from them. He departs, and the meeting is adjourned. The scene shifts to Lateswood, where houses are engulfed in flames and being destroyed. Lilifa has been captured by elves. One of the elves informs their leader they have conquered the area, but could not locate the travelers, though they did capture a half-elf royal. Her guard demands the elves release her, threatening to kill them if they scratch her. The leader, who Hylian had previously released, assaults one of them and commands her to be silent. He instructs his subordinates to leave, stating this should suffice as a message for the travelers. On their journey, Camilla clings to Hylian, prompting an annoyed response from Lee, who comments on her overly affectionate behavior, even if it's just for the sake of their disguise. Camilla, with a playful smile, retorts that she's merely playing her assigned role as Hylian's vulnerable comrade who was separated in the abyss. She questions whether Lead is implying she should slack off. She clarifies that this isn't what she meant exactly, but Camilla tells her to quiet down as she's ruining the atmosphere. Hylian intervenes, ordering them to stop playing around because they are nearing the settlement. As they approach, Leave notices a change in the wind's direction. Hylian queries if something is amiss, and she informs him of the strong scent of blood carried by the wind from the direction of the settlement. Shocked, he urges them to hasten their pace. Arriving at the settlement, they are horrified to find many injured people. Hylian is struck with disbelief, struggling to comprehend the situation. He directs Altina to begin treating the wounded. Suddenly, an arrow is aimed at him, but Lead intercepts it. She moves to retaliate, but he restrains her. Wenley, frustrated, accuses them of being puppets of Noblewood and warns of impending attack. Lifa intervenes, ordering Wenley to stand down, asserting that Hylian is not their enemy. Wenley insists they've been deceived and blames them for leaking their location, resulting in Lilifa being captured. Shocked, Hylian inquires about Lilifa's fate. Wenley orders archers to attack, but Lifa stops her, asserting her authority as queen and commanding obedience. Hylian apologizes for their untimely arrival and asks about Lilifa, seeking permission for Altina to tend to the wounded. Gratefully, Lifa accepts, explaining the extent of the injuries and her hopes for the survivors. Altina reassures her, using magic to cast healing aura rain, which brings relief and healing to the injured. The people rejoice at the restoration of their health. Hylian remarks that the healing should alleviate their suffering and inquires about casualties. Turning around, he is dismayed to see numerous lifeless bodies, feeling a profound sense of regret. The people gaze at the burning dead bodies. Hylian inquires if they were instructed to bring Altina and the other travelers to them by tomorrow before sunset. She responds that, in exchange, they will release Lilifa and the others. Hylian understands the information and remarks that it may be too late to inform her, but they are not affiliated with Noblewood, and he wanted to clarify that. She reveals that she already knows and assures him that she has never doubted him. She discloses that the elf he released that day led a large army and attacked them last night, revealing that he is the chief hunter, Salwyn Welt Noblewood. Hylian, perplexed, asks for clarification, and she explains that in human military terms, Salwyn is equivalent to a general and the commander of the elf warriors. She further reveals that above them are the elder and great elder, but in wartime, the chief hunter leads the elf warriors. Hylian questions why they want Altina, as he would understand if they wanted him or leave because she nearly killed him. Lifa apologizes, admitting that she doesn't know the reason either. They both stare at the burning bodies, and the situation becomes awkward. Hylian interrupts the silence, asking if Lifa has anything to add and reminding her to choose her words wisely. After a moment of contemplation, Lifa gestures towards Hylian and pleads for the rescue of their people and the captured Lilifa. Confused, Hylian questions if they aren't just going to hand them over, but Lifa explains that they lack the strength to forcefully capture anyone. Plus, even if they did comply, it would only lead to more trouble. Hylian ponders that Latestwood is already in shambles after a devastating attack and the loss of their queen. The rescue plan was their last hope, But it all went down the drain the moment Lilifa got tangled up in it. And just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, a mysterious new faction entered the scene, causing even the chief hunter to shake in their boot. This group didn't hate half-elves, and it was Helian's team. In Lifa's eyes, they are her last hope. But he cannot let his emotions cloud his judgment and endanger his own country out of pity. Depending on his actions could increase the chances of rebellion among the citizens of Archimaira. He reflects on the time he spent with them and decides to take a gamble. He asks her what she would offer in return if they rescued the prisoners. Helian believes that it will be a different situation if there is an appropriate reward, as he needs something to persuade his citizens. Lilifa reveals that she will offer herself in exchange. He's standing there, completely shaken, while she drops the bomb that her great-grandma was a queen of Noblewood who got captured by humans, and that her direct descendant bloodline is highly valued in their kingdom. She emphasizes her virginity as an additional factor that could increase her worth if sold, suggesting it would bring him a substantial sum. In response to Lifa's proposal, Helian counters, finding the idea absurd. He raises concerns about the implications for her country if she were to be sold. Lilifa reassures him, expressing confidence in Wenli's ability to succeed as queen and lead effectively. She offers to relinquish her authority to Helian until the sale, pledging to comply with his wishes during that time. Kneeling before him, she earnestly implores him to save her people. The rest of the people join her in kneeling, creating a poignant moment of appeal. Helian gazes at them, torn and uncertain of how to respond to their desperate plea. Helian watches in disbelief as she catches herself bowing to a lone traveler, clearly going against her own principles. She's practically throwing away her authority, but hey, desperate times call for desperate measures, right? Especially when you're the king of Archimaira and everything that happens under your watch is on you. It may seem foolish to help a dying force and risk it all for a measly reward. He recalls his chat with Lilifa, who refuses to play by the rules of the jungle because she's a proud citizen of Archimaira. He realizes what he must do. In a formal speech to Altina, Lilifa, and Camilla, Helian informs them that the Queen of Latestwood has requested their assistance. He reminds them of their kingdom's foundational principles rooted in mutual support and aiding the vulnerable, emphasizing the noble and indomitable spirits of the Latestwood people, who persevere steadfastly until the end. He draws parallels between their resilience and the ideals of their own kingdom, Archimaira. Helian proposes establishing a meaningful connection with them and asks if they have any reservations or objections. They respond unanimously in the negative, indicating their readiness to proceed without hesitation. With everything decided, he asks Lilifa to raise her head. She is confused, and Helian apologizes to her for concealing his identity and introduces himself once again. As the king of Archimaira, Helian Edda Elshanok, kingdom in the abyss, and declares that from this day forward, all of Lateswood's people will become their brethren. He welcomes her to the otherworld nation of Archimaira. The scene shifts to Archimaira, where citizens are informing each other that the king is about to give a speech urging everyone to attend. The division's army is controlling the crowd, and Lilifa looks at the country from the castle. Altina appears and asks if something is bothering her. She responds that it's nothing and thanks her for the invitation. She admits that she knew Helian was not an ordinary person, but never thought he was the king of such a vast country. Altina recounts the early days of their country when it was just her, a little werewolf, a lesser werecat, and a run-down old house as their base. They didn't even have proper tools and had to struggle to hunt a measly goblin. The worn-out knife they managed to scrounge up from that hunt was eventually melted down, reforged, and turned into a dagger now wielded by Belen as a token of their humble beginnings. Lilifa is left speechless by the tale. Altina goes on to describe how their group grew stronger through daily battles, made new friends along the way, and learned valuable lessons from both victories and defeats. After 120 years of hard work, they created Archimaira with its unique power. Today marks the 150th anniversary of their nation's founding, and they are on the cusp of a new era. Helian appears and walks up to the stage. He looks at his people and knights, thanking everyone for gathering. He tells them that they were attacked by an abnormal phenomenon and were forcibly teleported. He reveals that only the castle and the castle town were relocated, and all the important bases around them have vanished. They are in a world they know nothing about, meaning they have gone into another world. He states that they are completely isolated and that all the people present represent the entire population of the country. Helian further informs them that they have no clues on how to return and that the population of their capital has exceeded capacity, with stored food lasting only a few months. He explains that the forest they are in is a dangerous area, with monsters lurking inside, and the locals of this world are afraid to go near it. He explains that they are in the middle of a perilous area. The cause of the teleportation is still unknown. They have lost most of their population and land, and in terms of their natural power, there isn't even 1/100th of it left. He reveals that Archimaira is over. As Hellion surveys the crowd, he ponders aloud if anyone shares his perspective. He explains that the bustling crowd in the capital is there to commemorate the 150th National Foundation Day, a significant moment in their nation's story. With passion in his voice, he challenges them to consider if the progress made over 150 years was achieved during calm and peaceful times. He vividly recalls the countless hurdles they conquered, wars, natural disasters, and various obstacles, in the journey of the past century and a half. He points out that they have all 8 divisions gathered in one place and that the power to support their honor is still alive. Despite the many hardships they've endured, he questions what there is to worry about in this situation. He emphasizes that it is all because of their hard work and efforts that Archimaira is still standing. He then calls on them to respond with their roar if they are ready to face this trial with him. The people roar in unison. Hellion tells them that they are not the only ones in this situation and reveals that he discovered a nation of other races called Latestwood. He explains that this country's ideals are the same as theirs and that they have given him a variety of knowledge about this world. Although Latestwood lacks power, their character is worthy of respect. Lilifa listens to his speech carefully as Hellion continues, stating that the country never gave up despite being thrown into a harsh environment. He reveals that Latestwood is being attacked by an elven country called Noblewood, which kills humans and those with human blood, despising Hellion's kind as a lowly and filthy race. Because of this, they killed the citizens of Latestwood, stole their hometown, and kidnapped hundreds of women and children. He also reveals that they boldly demanded the 3rd Division Commander Altina as a condition to return the hostages. He declares that he has no intention of obeying them and will fight back against those who refuse to be reasoned with, demonstrating their forward momentum. Hellion tells the people that he has decided to acknowledge Lateswood as their new brethren and that they will fight against Noblewood. He explains that he will attempt to negotiate first, but if they do not accept and it comes to war, they must not let their guard down because they do not know how much manpower Noblewood has. The speech boosts the citizens' morale. Hellion reveals that he has entrusted this battle to a certain entity called Archimaira, and he calls upon it. He asks about the eyes that see everything. Liv responds that they are the eyes and that the sacred number given to her army is 1, representing the eyes that see everything on behalf of their king. He then addresses each division, seeking their commitment and unity in the upcoming struggle. He begins by asking for the claws that will shred their enemies in his stead. Valen steps forward, brandishing his sword, and proclaims the sacred number 2 given to their army, stating, "We are the claws that will shred through our enemies for our king." Turning to the mane that symbolizes power, Hellion asks for their presence. Altina steps forward confidently, stating her army's sacred number 3. "We are the mane that signifies our power on behalf of our great king." Next, Hellion inquires about the tongue that repels evil. Celis steps up and declares, "We are here with the sacred number 4. We are the tongue that repels magic on behalf of our supreme king." Hellion then asks about Archimaira's arm. Guardi steps forward and answers, "Our sacred number is 5. We are the arms that break through walls on behalf of our gallant king." He continues by asking about the ears of Archimaira. Camilla responds, "We are the ears that listen on behalf of our king with the sacred number 6. Moving on to the feet, Hellion questions their presence. Robin confidently states, "We are the feet that support the kingdom, with the sacred army number 7. Lastly, Hellion inquires about the wings that govern the sky. Nogard appears with his dragons and announces, "Our sacred number is 8. We are the wings that govern the sky on behalf of our king." Hellion commands Archimaira's chimeras to unleash their might against their enemies and rescue their newfound allies. This declaration raises the soldiers' morale, leaving Lilifa deeply impressed by his resolve. Archimaira asserts its presence in this new world, leaving a profound impact on those witnessing its power and resolve to bring change to their homeland. In Noblewood's prison, the half-elves are held as prisoners. One of them, in bad shape, apologizes to Lilifa for failing to protect her. She tells him not to move because his wounds will reopen. He insists it's nothing and urges her to take care of herself. She reassures him that she is fine and that he should just rest until he heals. Another half-elf mentions that he couldn't find the queen, and Lilifa speculates that she must be locked up somewhere else. Lilifa expresses confidence that Lifa and Helion will come to save them. The elf asks if they can trust Helion, and she assures them that it is safe to trust him because he is an amazing person who saved Lifa from the chief hunter and promised to help her. Suddenly, a guard appears and orders Lilifa to come out. The half-elf curses the guard, but Lilifa tells him it's fine. Another prisoner asks where they are taking her. The guard smiles and tells them their turn hasn't come yet. Lilifa tells them not to worry because Lifa will save them. She reassures them that she will be all right and is confident that everyone will return safely. Back in the forest, Helion and his partners are traveling somewhere. He looks at the map, reflecting on the successful speech he gave and feeling relieved that everyone shares his opinion regarding Noblewood. However, he is still unsure of their full strength and knows he cannot afford even a small mistake. Lifa informs him that they are about to enter the elves' territory. Helion questions if the elves can be trusted, doubting their willingness to cooperate. Lifa reassures him, explaining that the elves swore on the name of the divine tree, an absolute vow passed down through generations. Breaking this vow would label them as enemies of the elves. They reach the elven country, and Helion instructs Altina and Leave not to attack anyone without his orders. They both understand. The elves waiting for them remark on their arrival and wonder if they should take them to the captain. Lifa tells them that she has brought the travelers as requested. The elves smirk and tell them to follow, while Helion watches them, deep in thought.
Here I am, know it's been a while. I was in denial about my love. Here I stand, I know I walked away.